Hi there, and welcome again to another keynote session for QtCon Brasil 2022. We are quite happy in having Adam from KDAB joining us today for the keynote Qt in Changing Times. And Chiu has worked with Qt for 20 years. He has contributed code to KDE, Qt, and other open source projects, given many trainings on Qt, developed lots of customer software, and led teams of Qt developers. Today, Chiu is the Chief Commercial Officer at KDAB, the world's leading Qt consultancy. KDAB is a quite important player in the global Qt ecosystem. It's the company behind the development of amazing tools like Gamma Ray and Heap Track, and it has also done a quite important contribution for Qt education with their Qt widgets and more series of videos on YouTube. So yeah, without any further ado, Chiu, thanks for being here and welcome to QtCon Brasil.
Hi there. Thanks, Sandro. Hi, everybody. Thanks for inviting me, for having me. It's great to be at least virtually back in Brazil a little bit. I miss it. I haven't been in years, and I would have loved to be there in person, but we just talked a little bit. Maybe we can have the next one in person again in Brazil. I'd certainly love to come back. I have very good memories of it. Okay, so what do I want to talk about? I want to talk about how much I love Qt, as of hopefully we all do. I want to talk a bit about the history of Qt in terms of adaptation. It has done a lot of that over the years. I want to look a little bit at how the times are changing, how the environment for Qt and for us is changing, and a little bit where do we go from here. Maybe some ideas for things that we might look at in the future. So, where am I coming from? Just to put that in perspective, first of all, I'm Till, I'm 48, I'm a hacker. I love hanging out with my kids, with my cats. I love lifting heavy things, playing the ukulele, and I like perfumery a lot. I've done a lot of hacking, Linux, open source mostly, C++ and Qt. And these days I'm a suit, so I don't get to do a lot of programming anymore, but I still love it. And I love Qt. I have learned to program from Qt. I've grown up, as it were, in the Qt and KDE communities. My whole career is built on Qt. So that's what it says on on my LinkedIn. I'm an expert in that. KDAB, the company that I work at, is focused on Qt, has been for a very long time, since before the first release of Qt. So I'm really invested in Qt. I really like it, and I really, really like it to continue to thrive. So I'm very much coming to this presentation from a place of love. However, I'm not a fan of just putting our heads in the sand and hoping for the best and ignoring what's going on around us. So I do think it's valuable to provide a bit of background and look at how the world around us is changing and how that impacts Qt. And that's what I'm trying to do in the next minutes. So first of all, not to be too philosophical about it, but what is Qt? Actually, I've tried to distill it to one sentence, namely Qt, I think we would agree, is an excellent cross-platform development framework. That's kind of the lowest common denominator you can find. But I think we can ask ourselves, first of all, what is Qt actually? What does excellent mean? What does cross-platform actually mean? What did it mean historically? What does it mean going forward? And what does it mean to be a development framework? Again, past, present, and future. So let's explore that a little bit. What is Qt? Well, when I say Qt, I primarily mean the collaboratively developed open source technology and community. So I will be speaking about Qt as a technology and as a community. I'm not speaking about Qt Company, certainly not speaking for Qt Company or its products. I look at this primarily from the vantage point of somebody who's part of a technology community. So for me, this is a technology and a community primarily. It's also a product, but we'll touch on that a little bit later on. So Qt, what Qt is, has evolved. Originally, it was a toolkit for Unix, for X11, Linux mostly. Then it became kind of a cross-platform desktop toolkit. So for Mac, Windows, and Linux, that's primarily what people thought of it as. It kind of over time became a way of doing C++ in nicer, more pleasant ways. just a comprehensive C++ application development framework. Then the phone era happened, and it was primarily thought of as a way to make UI for Linux-based phones. Trolltech back in the day attempted this. By the way, I'm wearing, I don't know if you can see this, I'm wearing the oldest T-shirt that will still fit me, Developer Roadshow 2006 from Trolltech. So that's how long I've been around. So for a while, Trolltech tried to pitch Qt as primarily a thing to make Linux-based phones with. Nokia bought into that idea, bought the whole company. BlackBerry bought into that idea, tried to build the BlackBerry 10 ecosystem on it. So that was the thing that was dominating Qt for a while. And then in the last years, it has become primarily perceived as a toolkit for making Linux-based embedded devices. I think that's what most people think of when they hear Qt. So along that way, Qt has taken some pretty bold steps. At some point, Qt introduced a hard dependency on OpenGL, which at the time was quite controversial because it was basically anticipating that nearly all hardware in the embedded space and in phones certainly would have OpenGL support, which wasn't the case at the time. So it was a very kind of ambitious thing to do, and it turned out to be exactly correct. Everything did have OpenGL support, or nearly everything, and Qt being able to leverage that became a part of what made it so powerful, both on mobile and on embedded, and also on the desktop. Although on the desktop, OpenGL did create problems here and there, particularly on Windows, which doesn't treat OpenGL as a native technology. It introduced QML at some point, which was breaking from the we are a C++ toolkit. It was introducing a new kind of UI creator to the ecosystem, people who might be coming more from a web development or from a graphic design background. So QML was a way to make it more accessible to make UIs, make it faster, easier, reduce the turnaround times. But it was a pretty big departure from what was primarily a C++ framework before, and it wasn't without controversy. Certainly in KDAP, it wasn't without controversy. There are still people in KDAP who don't love QML, as I'm sure there are probably even in Qt companies still people who don't love QML. It was a big departure, but I think, again, it turned out to be exactly the right thing to do and a big success. At some point, they started building Qt Creator, which is a whole IDE just for doing Qt development, which I at the time thought was a mistake. I thought he should have invested in something like Eclipse, which was already around. Again, it turns out that was a bold but very necessary move, making it more modular, the whole idea of having dual or even triple licensing, protecting the future of Qt and its free availability through something like the KDE Free Qt Foundation. All of those are bold, necessary, and successful steps, I think. So Qt has kind of a history of not being afraid to ruffle feathers and to shake the boat, which I think is important to remember at this point in time. Just some examples. I don't know if some of you who've been around a while might recognize the Nokia N900, which was a pretty cool kind of PDA, almost computer in a pocket thing. There's a KDE 1 desktop. That's for a while what KDE and Qt looked like. There's Blender, which is a giant desktop application. That's a big part of it. The Qtopia green phone, which very few people have actually held in their hand. I'm one of them. That was Trolltech's attempt at making a phone. The Zorus SL5500, which was also a very cool device of the PDA class, which has since gone the way of the Dodo. And of course, an embedded medical touchscreen device. So all of that is Qt. All of that has been Qt over the years. So it's certainly been quite the journey. If you think about what is Qt, actually, it's been many things, and it is many things, and it has changed what it is over the years. The next question that we should ask is, what is excellent? So what is it when we say Qt is an excellent toolkit? Well, traditionally, it was excellent because it was much better than doing raw C++ development, because you had basically incomplete, broken STLs or no STLs. The standard library wasn't very comprehensive. The C++ standard wasn't very comprehensive. It didn't have many things that we now consider to be standard. It was hard to learn. It was easy to do badly. You could shoot yourself in the foot. It was not an accessible language, and certainly kind of error prone, at least if you didn't have very, very good background in how it works and how it's supposed to be used. So Qt kind of made C++ development sane. It made it pleasant. It added great documentation. It added APIs that were intuitive, more familiar to people coming from different backgrounds like Java or C#. It had this vibrant community. It had open source best practices. So that all made it excellent, particularly relative to what was the previous experience of doing raw C++ development. It had consistency, it had backwards compatibility, it had these broad platform abstractions. So wherever platform you were on, you could use the same APIs and they would just work. So all of that was very convenient and great. And Qt was, it's no accident that Qt has become so successful because of exactly those things. So it has been and still is excellent in those ways. What is cross-platform? That's also an interesting question. Originally, cross-platform meant more than one Unix. So it didn't run just on Linux. It also ran on HPUX and things like that, AIX and those kinds of things. Then, of course, Windows and Mac came along. Actually, they were there quite early, particularly Windows. Then the phone platforms came in, Symbian because of Nokia, the BlackBerry 10 platform, Linux-based platforms like Maemo and MeeGo, eventually Android, iOS, then eventually the embedded space. Of course, Linux became very popular and embedded, and Qt was already there. But then real-time operating systems came in, QNX, VxWorks, Integrity, and so on. Lately, even MCUs, so microcontrollers, have been added to the platforms, and through WebAssembly and other things, even to some degree the web. So again, what is cross-platform has also changed over the years. And finally, what is a development framework? Well, you could, in a nutshell, say, at least historically, it's a widget set plus everything you need to make it work. So middleware, things to do networking and safe memory management and ownership hierarchies and all the backend things that you need, file system access and so on. Of course, the UI widgets part of it, but then also tooling for the developer to make life pleasant and easy, for designers eventually, and even for quality assurance, things like Squish, which has now become part of Qt itself in a way. So that's historically, I guess, what the scope of Qt as a development framework has been. All right, so that's hopefully a very short summary of where we come from and what is still true today. But if we look at it a little bit more critically, we have to say that what Qt primarily is now is it's one of several products made and sold by Qt Company. So it is very much part of a portfolio of products that Qt Company have by now. It has, over the years, focused primarily, at least in terms of what it's being promoted as by Qt Company, as a UI toolkit for commercial embedded user interfaces. That's really where the focus has been over the last several years. And the contributor ecosystem has diminished. We have to face that. There aren't as many people contributing to Qt for various reasons as there have been, and development has, more than it was in the past, been dominated by Qt Company lately. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm just saying that we have to acknowledge that is the case. So what does excellent mean these days? And there, I think the bar has actually been raised. So what was a decent developer experience 10 years ago is, I don't think, no longer considered a decent developer experience. If you have worked with modern languages and ecosystems like Go or Rust or Dart and Flutter, all the web technologies, actually, what you find as a developer workflow has evolved massively from what I considered a normal developer workflow when I was still writing lots of code, which was, to be fair, quite painful. But it's the pain so you don't quite know what you're missing. Well, those of you who have worked with more modern frameworks certainly know what I'm talking about. It is a usually much more polished experience, much nicer in terms of getting access to the tools, updating them, having access to the component ecosystem through simple command line tools, having great documentation, great tooling, having consistent and well-documented APIs. So all of that has become, I would say, in a way, standard, even to the point where these experiences, if we're really honest, are better than what you find certainly in pure C++, but even C++ with Qt in some ways is not as nice and comfortable to use as some of these more modern environments. So I think it's fair to say that the way C++ does things is no longer considered the gold standard. And the things that Qt was adding to C++, things like, singles and slots and value-based type APIs and introspection and memory management models and accessible concurrency and data handling and networking, these things are, by and large, just considered, I would say, table stakes, in the sense that basically everybody expects that to be there. And even C++ as an ecosystem, while it still lags these other more modern frameworks, does bring a lot of this already. So you could argue that the added value of Qt over basic C++ development has diminished in some ways, because if you take, let's say, modern standard C++ with modern compilers, modern STLs, the ecosystem around those, you are getting a whole lot more than you got 20 years ago when Qt started out. The experience is less painful. It's not as complete. It's not as pleasant as other things, but it's certainly more complete and more pleasant than it was. So even relative to Qt, relative to C++, let's say pure raw C++, the added value of Qt over just using C++ standard facilities has diminished over time. So Qt is still great. It's still, consistent API on top of C++, but it doesn't save you as badly as it did when I started using. I mean, just doing bare C++ 20 years ago was certainly no fun at all. You can consider it fun or not these days, but it's certainly easier than it was back then. And so what Qt adds is a little bit diminished relative to that. And finally, what is cross-platform now? Well, let's face it. For most people, for most of the world, cross-platform these days means Android and iOS and the web. By the way, if you get the Bob's Country Bunker reference, that certainly dates you. I won't explain it, but maybe a few of you think it's funny. But let's get back to what is cross-platform. So predominantly, I mean, most people build apps and websites. That's just what the world has become. So for most developers out there, cross-platform means it can do both Android and iOS and also the web. On the desktop, nearly everything, if you really look at the big picture, has become a web-based application. I mean, even I, in my daily life, use predominantly web-based applications for what I do in my business and even in my private life. I do still have native applications that I use because I'm old school and I'm used to it, and sometimes because they're faster or because I have to deal with very large amounts of data and lots of screens and things like that. But by and large, the desktop application world has become web-based. For embedded, my impression is that people would really like it to be web-based, and the only reason why it's not is because the web frameworks are too heavy, and so people are not able to use web technologies, at least not exclusively, on embedded. But they would prefer to do that because it's the biggest developer pool out there. Talent availability is a limiting factor very often. It's arguably easier to hire web developers than it is to hire C++ developers. And you have these really large ecosystems that make life easier in terms of training, in terms of accessibility of third-party components. It's easier to outsource, cheaper to get development done externally. So the web and app development are really dominating, I would say, software development at large at this point. And so the expectation of what targets are interesting, what platforms are interesting, has changed, and thus also the definition of what constitutes a cross-platform toolkit. So what about development framework? What does it mean to be a development framework? So the way I see it these days, people kind of want to have one of two things. Either they want to freely mix and match. They want to pick an operating system. They want to pick a language. They want to pick a middleware. They want to pick a way of doing UI, a widget set, and they want to be flexible in all of those things. And that means that the individual components of that need to be minimal. They need to be just a widget set, or just a middleware, just an OS, or just a language. And people don't necessarily appreciate, if they approach this if they approach Qt from this point of view, they don't appreciate all of the stuff that is in Qt that isn't a widget set, right? Because for many people, their platform already brings a whole lot of stuff. Let's say you're on Android, right? Why would you not use all of the Android native stuff, particularly if that's the only platform you're targeting? And why would you instead add, a Qt dependency in your backend where you'd really rather use Go or Rust or something like that, and have it behind some sort of messaging service or behind a REST API? So for many people, Qt is actually too much because it brings a lot of things that they actually already get from their platform or would rather use from somewhere else. And the other part of the story is that people look for a very cohesive development story that covers not just the UI technology, but the whole stack. So there you're in kind of Apple land, where effectively from the silicon to the UI, everything is kind of one experience, one story, one vendor, and you just get completely immersed in that ecosystem, and you're then an Apple developer, and you only target Apple hardware, and you only use Apple facilities and Apple libraries and Apple UI technologies. And Qt, for better or worse, is not that either. It's not a cohesive top-to-bottom developer story. There have been attempts in that direction, like, for example, by shipping, boot to Qt, which is kind of a Linux, so you can get started, sort of. You buy your silicon, you get a Linux to start out with, but you're not really, given a full solution, because then you have to worry about how do you update that and how do you extend it and so on. So you still have to go to somebody else and buy the Linux effectively, or make it yourself. So it's not quite a cohesive story top to bottom. And it's kind of a bit too much of everything to really fit into this kind of mix and match scenario. So both too much and too little in different ways, I would say. So now let me make a little excursion to the dark side, namely the question of money and monetization, and how Qt is funded. So how is Qt funded? Well, the majority of it is funded, of course, by Qt company and by selling commercial licenses, basically making users pay for developer tooling and for the right to distribute the results in products, so mostly devices, right? That's really the only significant source of income for Qt company. And in terms of the whole ecosystem, I mean, we contribute to Qt as KDAP. We fund that through providing services. Qt company obviously also provides services. So some of it is funded through services, but the vast majority comes from the licensing revenue. So that really is the thing that keeps Qt alive, because it funds all of the developers that move Qt forward and maintain it on a regular basis, which, by the way, to be entirely clear, I absolutely appreciate Qt company's necessity and right to make money this way, because otherwise it would not be possible to fund something the size and complexity of Qt in a sustainable way. So I don't question that at all. I think it's absolutely necessary and important. But let's face it, that is the way that Qt is funded. Qt company sells licenses, and that's where the money comes from. But how are the others funded? So if you look at other UI frameworks, technologies, usually they come from big US tech companies, and to them, it's not about selling those developer tools. It's basically about selling ads and or apps on storage and compute and cloud services. So to them, they just want to have basically more apps, more people making apps, more apps using more data. They want it to be easy and free to make apps, and the more people do that and the more apps there are, the better for them, because they make money on the traffic and the storage and selling the apps and selling ads for the apps and so on. So charging for the tools and libraries is fundamentally not worth it. It's just a barrier to entry, which they want to reduce. So effectively, if you look at the world out there and you really take, including apps and web and everything, by and large, developer tools and frameworks are free, both free as in beer, and most of the time also free as in freedom, meaning they're very liberally licensed. So you can use them very freely. You don't have to pay anybody, and you are not constrained in how you can use them, at least mostly. That's, didn't used to be the case, but even Microsoft gives everything away for free now. Apple certainly gives everything away for free now. Google does, Facebook does, and so on. That's the reality of it. I have to qualify that a little bit, because this is mostly true for what I would call commoditized software development. So that's things where, it's all about just making a lot of it quickly and easily, things like making apps and making websites, but to some degree also making UIs for embedded devices, because that is becoming increasingly commoditized. I explain a little bit more what I mean by that. But that basically puts Qt into a structural economic problem, because it's funded fundamentally by charging for something that everybody else gives away for free. Now, that's not necessarily new, because Qt was also itself available for free. At least that was the perception. It was possible to use it under open source licenses. So it was kind of competing with itself in terms of charging for it. And Qt company's done quite well despite that. But there's a difference between the constraints of the LGPL and the GPL versus a completely free MIT stack like the one Flutter provides from Google, for example. So there will always be people that need to pay or want to pay because they can't use free software, because they want certain guarantees, because they are in regulated environments, and because what they do is not commoditized. And by that, I mean, if you remember the 90s, all of the web and design agencies all of a sudden started figuring out how to make websites. And so you would go to them for design, and they would, of course, build you the thing also. And what I see happening in embedded touchscreen UIs is the same thing. So you can go to a design house these days and tell them, make me a design for a touchscreen UI and nice user experience. And they will most likely be able to give you at least most of the implementation. They might need expert help from people like us to do a bit of the heavy lifting, but by and large, it's a commodity thing that lots of people out there can do. At least that's where it's trending, right? There are still places, of course, if you're building software for very highly regulated medical devices, or if you're doing things that require highly specialized knowledge of the domain or of the technologies involved, of the buses and protocols and so on, that's not commodity. And of course, there will always be people who will want to pay for that and have a vendor that they can talk to and a throat to choke and so on. So that's always going to be there. But of course, there is a risk of the alternatives at some point becoming so competitive that there is high pressure on, at least the price of Qt, if not even people considering if they should be using something else, because the alternatives are becoming quite compelling. So as it stands today, I would say, if you look at things like, Flutter or the Slint, which is a Rust-based UI toolkit, Flutter is still too heavy to really use an embedded. Slint's not comprehensive enough yet. Other solutions aren't either. So, there is still a lot of distance, I would say, to Qt. But if you follow the trajectories of where these things are going, it is not unlikely that the Rust ecosystem is going to grow much more, that people will want to be working with a native Rust UI technology like Slint and not necessarily, appreciate the things that Qt brings to the table as much as they do now. So, having said that sounded maybe a little depressing. That's not the intention. I actually think we should just really take stock of this, acknowledge it, and then see, where do we go from here? What do we pursue as a strategy to help stay relevant? And I think there are actually quite a few things that we can and should do. I am still convinced that Qt is by far the leading solution when it comes to cross-platform desktop development for everything where the browser is not enough. And there are, of course, still many things where the browser is not enough, be it for, again, performance reasons, data throughput reasons, graphical requirements, 3D requirements, and so on, although the browser technologies, to be fair, are catching up there. But there are still reasons to do native Mac and Windows, specifically cross-platform desktop development, and there is nothing out there by a long shot that competes with Qt in that. Unfortunately, it's not been the focus of development for some years. So that position, I think, is slowly eroding. And I think Qt, again, I'm talking about the technology and the community, would do well to try and put an emphasis on this. I appreciate that for Qt company, whose business is focused on commercial embedded UI, this isn't an easy sell because there is not a whole lot of revenue coming in through the desktop. But as a community, I think we should not give up on this position as the leading solution for that space, because it's very much still relevant. That's why, for example, as KW, we try to continue to invest in the desktop and build things that make it better and easier for people to use Qt on the desktop. The other thing that's actually really great is QML. I think, having not been a huge fan of it initially, but I have come around to the idea that QML is actually a really nice way of having declarative UI description. Interestingly, maybe the weakest QML story is currently on the desktop. So we are not leveraging the combination of two of our strengths, I would say, and making QML, Qt Quick, truly a great desktop solution, I think, is one of the underutilized point of leverage that we would have to continue to be relevant. Maybe you have different opinions, but I do think we could do a lot more with that than we have been doing. I still think one of the original qualities of Qt, comprehensive, consistent, high quality API with great documentation, that is still the case. And it is still, even compared to other, let's say, to Go or Rust or something like that, or Flutter, it can still compete, particularly in the comprehensiveness, as we heard or as you hopefully heard in Volker's keynote just now. Of course, Qt is looking to expand the scope of what Qt is, as it has always done. I hope I made that clear. So adding things like speech to Qt make a lot of sense to me, so that we can keep this competitive positioning in terms of being the comprehensive, consistent, high-quality API for application development. I think that's a really good thing to try and push that forward as much as we can. For all its warts and faults, C++ is and remains a very proven and established programming language. It does get better. It evolves. I think we would do well to embrace it more than we do, to try and reduce the overlap with Qt, between Qt and C++, and promote it. It has benefits even over Rust. And I think, leveraging the strengths of C++ is also something where we have potential to do even better. And lastly, certainly not least, I think the fact that Qt is and remains pretty much the only significant independent solution for this kind of thing, and is not dependent on a single vendor, not even on Qt Company, thanks to things like the KDE Free Qt Foundation, to the ecosystem of other companies that contribute to it, that could take it forward even if Qt Company died tomorrow, as a very, very strong strategic plus that, again, maybe we don't leverage enough and don't communicate enough. So where do I see Qt fit? In a nutshell, I think that if you're not one of the big guys in California, and you need to compete with them because the customer expectation is very much, needs to look like an iPhone or like a high-end Samsung device. So you have to be at that level in terms of the things you need to build, but you are not Google or Apple or Samsung. So what do? You don't necessarily want to have your whole business depend on what they provide to you for free, quote unquote, because they're just monetizing it in different ways. So for example, the car guys, there's a reason why Apple doesn't make infotainment systems in the cars yet. They probably have to make their own car for that to be a thing. And why Google has had a really hard time to get Android into the car, because the car makers do not want Apple or Google to be owning the customer experience in the car. That's the reason why Qt's been very successful there, because it is the only viable alternative if you are not able to completely have top to bottom your own stack, which some have tried, right, and failed. So I believe very strongly that the only, particularly from a European point of view, and also from the point of view of companies in Brazil and elsewhere in the world, in India, certainly, in Africa, the thing to invest in and the only way to be competitive is Linux and Qt and open standards and open data and free software, because that's the only way to build something collectively that can compete with the offerings of those who monetize us through our data and through our purchases. So I think contributing to that and getting more people to contribute to that again would further strengthen, something that is just a huge competitive advantage that is currently, taking a back seat relative to, selling licenses to people who make a better touchscreen devices. So what can Qt do to remain competitive? I strongly believe that in order for Qt, which kind of comes with C++ as a developer story, at least predominantly, to continue to be competitive for the developer experience, it has to embrace the fact that it does, it is not just Qt, it is also C++, meaning the experience top to bottom, from where you get your compiler from and how you update the toolkit and how you add third-party components that might not be Qt components. It might be Niels Lohmann's JSON library. How do you get that? I mean, you basically Google around, you pull it down manually, you manually integrate it with CMake, and so on. There's no help from Qt as a framework for any of that. So I think Qt Company has focused a lot on the designer story in the last few years, but neglected, and we have collectively as a community neglected, to bring the C++ and Qt developer experience to the level of ecosystems like Go or the web. We still cannot install a third-party dependency with a one-line command line and have it be integrated into our build environment and have it be versioned and update and deployable and do code signing properly, and that whole end-to-end experience for the developer is falling behind, has fallen behind, and this whole C++ community is suffering from that. I think Qt is very uniquely placed to really bring that forward, not just for Qt itself, but also for C++. Unfortunately, we haven't really taken that as part of our mission, and I think there's huge potential in that. I strongly believe we should continue to invest in the desktop, again, because of the lead we have already there. I also strongly believe that not everybody will want to learn C++, and there are many developers coming up, and also even old school guys like me, certainly within KDAP, would prefer to do a lot of their development in safer languages, in faster languages, in more pleasant to use languages like Python or Rust or Go, and embracing that as, for example, that's why KDAP invests in something like CXX-Qt, which is Rust bindings for Qt, because we believe that enabling people to use other things than C++ can only benefit us, and making QML accessible to those languages would really help. Improving the mobile experience, I think, is crucial, because again, it is about Android and iOS if you really take the big picture, and Qt, while it perfectly works on those platforms, isn't competitive really when you get honest about it with other solutions that focus primarily on the mobile spectrum. So there's room for improvement there. I think we could do more on the web. WebAssembly is a great start, but we have had ideas over the years of using QML maybe as a web front-end language to Flutter does it. Why shouldn't QML do it? That isn't being explored to my knowledge. So that's maybe potential here, but just generally embracing the idea that people will want to have some of their UI also running on the web, architecturally catering for these use cases, where some of the application that is on the medical device is also available through the web, or some part of what you do on the desktop in your big desktop application needs to be accessed also from the web, if only for remote access for maintenance and support, but also for actual first-class use cases. I think we need to embrace the idea that that is something that people need to do, and Qt currently doesn't really provide a very strong story for that, but it absolutely can. And generally, of course, the lower barriers we have to use Qt and to contribute to Qt, the better. I think that's that's not hard to see. I have to point out that making it ever more expensive doesn't particularly help with that. And but I think, generally speaking, I think we can return to or actively embrace the biggest strength of Qt, which is a vibrant, established community, a broad technology platform that we all collaborate on, an open governance process that allows us to do that without being completely controlled by one entity, an attractive, proven alternative to the big offerings. I think that is what Qt is and should be, and I think we can or we should bring our focus back to that to try and build on the strengths that we certainly have as a Qt community and technology. So what about Qt Company, right? It's been a cop-out to say, well, I'm mostly worried about the community and the technology of it. Of course, Qt Company is the biggest player in this space, and it has to work for them too, right? It's easy for me to say, well, they should do this and we should do that, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't work for Qt Company, then none of this is very meaningful, at least in the long term. Having said that, I think that there are very, very encouraging signs lately. What I've been hearing and seeing from Volker, from the Qt Company at large, is very, very encouraging. There is a community manager again, which is a great thing. There's a partner manager again, which is a great thing. The mobile story is being addressed. Python is getting strengthened. We do get interest in what we do around Rust and so on. There are definitely attempts to revitalize the contributor ecosystem. So I would be surprised if what I have been saying isn't at least by some people in Qt Company seen in similar ways. And I actually think we are quite aligned in that. So I think that's very encouraging. Speaking for KDAP, we're certainly happy to be part of that going forward, and we're very encouraged by what we're seeing lately. So I think things are moving in the right direction. I just wanted to make sure that I'm not just painting a picture of gloom and doom here. But again, I think it is important to appreciate the context that we're in and to be realistic about strengths and weaknesses. So in a nutshell, long live Qt. I still love it. I think it has made some bold moves. It might be time to make some more bold moves, I think. And again, head in the sand is not going to bring us forward. But again, Qt has always attacked the challenges that it has faced and the changing environments head on. I think it can do it again, it should do it again, and it will do it again. So with that, thank you very much. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Tio. Brigadão for your talk. I think we have some time for a couple of questions. And so let's check here our chat. And yeah, we have a question from Araceli. Are you aware of any discussions in the Qt Company about trying different models of funding besides selling licenses?
So I'm not aware of any. I'm not privy to those conversations, but I can tell you with confidence that Qt Company is full of very smart people, and I am very sure that they are internally discussing lots of different things. I'm also quite sure that they are aware of what's happening around them in the world, and I would be extremely surprised if there weren't conversations about, how could this work sustainably longer term. I think the investments they have made in QA tooling and in developer tooling, they've acquired FrogLogic and they've acquired Exivion lately. selling, value-added tools to their customer base with the sales force that they do have, which of course takes some load off of monetizing Qt itself. I think you're already seeing, that thinking kind of being expressed that way. But obviously, I'm not directly involved there. I'm not part of Qt company, and they don't necessarily invite me to the table to have these conversations. But again, I would be very surprised if they're not thinking about it in some ways.
Cool. And so we've got another question, and my impression is that Qt is very attractive for large companies. I want to know if there was, and if there was the experience of KDAB providing Qt consultant services to small companies or single developers.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. Obviously, Qt company's focus has been on the larger enterprises. That's where most of the money comes from, of course. We do serve anything from a single developer to a very large multinational. And indeed, the experience that the small guys have is kind of not been great, or at least we've seen some erosion of their experience, because for the little guys, it makes a lot more of a difference, if they have to pay a considerable portion of their yearly budgets for Qt. Just the relation between what a small company has to pay for a developer relative to how much money they make, and what a large company has to pay relative to how much money they make. There's just a huge relative difference there. So it's more painful for the small guys. They also suffer more from the inefficiencies introduced by things like having to sign up to actually get the download, right? So those are hoops to jump through that are more painful for small companies and individual developers than they are maybe for large corporations. Or in the large companies, people just don't care as much. They have more time maybe to deal with that kind of thing. So it is in fact more painful to use Qt the smaller you are, and both from a pricing point of view and from a developer story convenience point of view. Of course, I mean, we try to help people as best we can. But yeah, I would say Qt is easier to use in a large enterprise now to get, to pay for, to use, and to maintain than it is if you're a smaller company. That's a bit of a pity, of course. I mean, and I'm talking about the commercial version of Qt. Of course, you can use the open source version of Qt, but even that has, there are some barriers there because of the LTS not being available immediately under open source and so on. So it is becoming harder for the smaller guys to use it, which I don't think is the right. That's again, I would like to reduce those barriers for adoption, because small companies become large companies, individual developers get hired to run the development department in large companies. And if they have a good experience, they will bring that good experience. That's what happened the first 20 years. And I think we should kind of get back to that a little bit, make it easier for the little guys to use Qt in nice ways.
Great. And so I've got another question actually from myself. And has KDAB already had any experience with developing production-ready Qt for WebAssembly-based projects?
Yes, we do. I mean, we could talk all night about that, but I do think that WebAssembly has great potential for Qt, and I'm very happy that it exists. But I think that the expectations that people have are overblown, because you can't just build an embedded application or a desktop application with WebAssembly and then expect to have a great experience. It's not going to be a great experience because it's an embedded UI or a desktop UI running in the browser, and that just isn't a great experience unless you start reworking it, unless you start making a UI that actually works in the browser in terms of the interaction paradigms, in terms of the resources you have. Data is no longer local. You have latencies and delays and so on. None of that has anything to do with Qt being able to render onto WebAssembly. It's just that you're running in a browser now, and that's a different story from running locally on a device or running on the desktop. So it is technically absolutely possible, and Qt on WASM does a great job technically, but that doesn't give you a great browser-based experience. So there's a gap between just building it, watching it go in the browser and saying, oh yeah, that's cool that it works, but that's not a product, right? That's not a great experience, not a great solution. You haven't solved any of the deployment issues. Your development workflows are need to be adjusted and so on. So it's kind of one of those, technically it works, but from mostly business value points of view, it's necessary but not sufficient. What we have right now is maybe the best way to put it.
Mm-hmm. Great. I guess with that, we finish this second keynote for QtCon Brasil 2022. Thank you very much, Chiu, for joining us today, and thanks to KDAB for sponsoring this conference. I hope to see you soon in a next conference.
Thanks again for having me. Cheers, everybody.
Bye-bye.